Hello everybody, welcome back to Old Timer Noob Plays GMT Silver Bayonet. Today we'll be playing through Scenario 2, the lure and the ambush. This is a scenario that's a little bit more involved than the ones we've played up to this point. It's getting us ready for the larger scenarios in the campaign game. And also for this scenario, instead of using the scenario cards, we'll actually be playing on the map board. This is a 7-turn scenario, and here's the order of battle for both sides. You see that they have reinforcements that come in at different places throughout the scenario. I've gone ahead and placed all these reinforcement units over here on the turn track, and I've separated them out by unit. So all these units here, for example, are units that come in on turn 4. There's really no 24 turns in this game, but it's easier for me to do this on Vassal by separating them out like this. We also have several scenario special rules that deal with the movement of the reinforcements, and these rules are designed to simulate helicopter movement. There are no helicopters in this scenario, but some of these rules will replicate the movement of the units using helicopters. So we're getting ready for the big campaign game. I won't go over these now, but when it's time, like for example when this Arvin Ranger unit comes on board in game turn 4, we'll take a look at scenario special rule number 2 and see what that's all about. So what's the objective? Let's look at the victory conditions. The FWA player gets the typical 1 point for each Pavin step destroyed, 8 points if the Arvin supply unit enters Palais Meh, which is the Special Forces hex right here. By the end of the game, otherwise 4 points if it has not been eliminated. The Pavin player gets 1 point for each FWA step destroyed, 3 points if he can keep the supply unit from not reaching, or keep the supply unit from reaching Palais Meh, and an additional point for each reduced company not adjacent to an enemy unit at the end of the scenario. If they get lucky and push the CIDG, South Vietnamese units, out of Palais Meh, they get an extra 4 points. Whoever has more points at the end of 7 turns wins the game. Pretty straightforward. Historically, what happened is the North Vietnamese conducted a diversionary attack on the Palais Meh Special Forces camp here. Their main objective being to lure the Arvin relief column out of Pleiku so they could ambush them on the roadway and take them out. My understanding is that Pleiku was the headquarters of the Arvin Command in the 2 Corps region of Vietnam, and by getting rid of them, the Pavin player could take control of Highway 19, which is the main corridor down in South Vietnam. They weren't exactly successful. They did inflict some casualties, but they weren't able to take over Palais Meh, and they didn't destroy the Arvin Command out of Pleiku. I'll be keeping track of the air points, the game turn, and the victory points off screen, and I'm also going to keep the sequence of play off screen too to minimize the distractions. I won't be going between the sequence of play and the other player aids so often during the game. The scenario begins with the combat declaration phase by the Pavin player, so I think maybe initially the Pavin player is going to try some maneuver combat against the CIDG units in the Special Forces hex. So let's set that up. Offensive bombardment phase. The Pavin player does have a mortar here, but I think I'm going to hold out and hope for a favorable ER roll so that I can use the mortar during maneuver combat for fire support. So there's no combat reaction, and now the combat resolution beginning with attack coordination. The Pavin player has no headquarters unit on the board, so he's going to have to roll against his nominal ER rating of 3 to be coordinated. And he got his ER +1, so he's uncoordinated. That means there's no attacker support. He can't use his mortar. And for maneuver combat, he's going to have a 1 column shift to the left. Okay. So let's determine the combat odds. Have 8, 12 against 2. That's 6 to 1. The lead units will be the top unit in each stack. There's no support fire from the Pavan player, but I think the FWA player is going to try 6 points of air for combat support. The Pavan player can't do ADF, air defense fire, because they need to have more steps available than the amount of air power, and they only have 6 steps, so they can't do that. So let's roll on the bombardment table. Under the 6th column for the FWA player, rolled a 2. That means the FWA player is going to have a die roll modifier of 3 during the maneuver combat. Alright, so now it's time to roll on the maneuver combat table. Let's see what we have here. We started with 6 to 1 odds. There's a 1 column shift to the left because the attack is uncoordinated, so we're in the 5 to 1 column. There's a 1 column efficiency rating shift because the CIDG has an ER of 7 while the Pavan only has an ER of 6. That puts us in the 4 to 1 column. Nobody's fatigued. The attacker had no support result. There's no leader, no armor, no terrain effects for the Special Forces camp. Is +3. And then of course we had the defender's result of +3, but we can't have more than 3. So the attacker is going to be attacking on the 4 to 1 column with a +3 on his die roll. 2 + 3 is a 5. Not bad considering. So the defender, let's see, we take this 2 here and we divide it by the TDV of the hex. Well, the TDV of the Special Forces hex is 4. That results in a fraction, so there are no step losses. However, the defender must fatigue 1 unit. We'll do the guy, oh, it's got to start with the lead unit, so it'll be this guy here. They're both the same, so it doesn't really matter, but I'll move this guy to the top. Now normally, anytime you have a result with an A or D in front of it, the unit that suffers that result has to retreat 1 hex. However, we're using the no retreat option. And what that says here is units defending in a hex with a TDV of 3 or more, which applies in this case, may ignore a retreat result and remain in place. There's no additional step loss, but 1 unit must be fatigued. This part here says, the blue part says, this does not cause additional fatigue. That means that if everybody in the hex is already fatigued, there's no additional fatigue. But in our case, we're going to have to fatigue the other unit because it's called for by the result. So these guys will not both be fatigued. I'll just put 1 marker on there, but they're both fatigued. And we can get rid of this. So the CIDG got off relatively light on that. They're fatigued, but they're not going to be conducting any offensive maneuvers, so they can still use their defense value. Not too bad. Right, there was no other combat declared. There's no assault combat, so we can get rid of this. And since there's no more combat, that ends the Pavan half of turn number 1. So let's go to turn, or the FWA half of the turn. Right, the FWA doesn't get any reinforcements this turn, but we are going to move this guy down here. 3, 6, 9. He'll be closer to the action. He's not going to declare any combat. We do have 4 air points remaining. that we can use for offensive bombardment. So let's do that. We'll put it right there. The Pavan player does have sufficient steps available to conduct air defense fire. So let's say we've got here, oops, wrong table. No, I had it right. What am I doing? Air defense fire. Nothing here applies. Rolled a 9, so that's clearly a miss. So now the FWA can use all 4 points. Rolling on the 4 column. Nothing here applies. Got a 7. That's 1. Divided by the TDV of 3 is a fraction, no effect. Since there was no combat declaration, there won't be any combat reaction, and there won't be any combat resolution. So that ends the FWA half of turn number 1, and that ends turn number 1. All right, so we'll move the turn marker up. The initial phase will adjust the FWA air points. This turn and all subsequent turns, the FWA gets 15 air points, so we'll mark that on the chart. We can remove all the first and final fire markers, which we've already done. There's no fatigue to be recovered this turn and no headquarters to be replaced. The FWA player does get some reinforcements this turn. He gets a headquarters unit and this reduced heavy weapons company. So now that they've been placed, we can move them. I think I'll move both units 3, 6, 9 to here. Combat declaration. This seems like a good time for these 2 companies of the Pavan to conduct an assault combat on this lone CIDG unit out in the woods. So let's place a declared combat here. And this unit's not going to do anything right now. Well, actually, you know what? Probably should have moved him to here. Let me just say that I did. All right. Offensive bombardment. The Pavan player is going to allocate some fire from his mortar here. Place a first fire. So on the 2 column, you roll a 5. 1 divided by the TDV of 4 is no effect. So we can get rid of this. And now comes the combat reaction phase, where the defender can conduct combat refusal. So as specified in the rules, US Delta and Arvin CIDG units, unless restricted, may attempt to conduct combat refusal and subtract the TDV of the hex from their roll. All right, so the TDV of this hex, let's see what it is a 3. So they can roll, subtract 3, and if they get 7 or less, they can conduct combat refusal. Well, I think that's going to work because they have an ER of 7, but we'll roll anyway. 10 minus 3 is a 7, so they can conduct combat refusal. So what happens now, if the unit passes the check, retreat the entire stack 1 hex. Now, in other games that I've played, normally when somebody retreats, they have to end up a certain number of hexes away from the attacking player. So in this case, there's going to be a 1 hex retreat. Normally, it would have to be 1 hex away. I wasn't sure about that, so I went on Board Game Geek and I posed the question, and Mitchell Land was gracious enough to answer pretty quickly, within 15 minutes. And he pointed me to the restrictions here for combat refusal. And there's no restriction on the units remaining adjacent to the attacking unit, right? But here are the restrictions. A unit that conducts combat refusal cannot retreat into a hex that is the target of a declared combat, into an empty hex in an enemy zone of control, which wouldn't apply here. There's an exception for PAV and Delta and CADG. It can't retreat into terrain that's prohibited to it for movement, and it can't retreat into a friendly occupied hex in violation of stacking limits. My question was, would I be able to retreat this unit into here, into the Special Forces camp, because they're still adjacent to the attacking units, and apparently that is a legal move. So that's where their combat refusal is going to take them, into the Special Forces camp. Well, since that has happened, the active player removes the combat declaration marker and has the option to immediately advance up to 4 stacking points from the attacking forces into the vacated hex. So this assault marker is going to come off, and they have the option of advancing into here. I don't really see the need to do that right now, so we'll just leave them right there. Well, that was the only declared attack. There's no maneuver combat, so that ends the PAV and half at turn number 2. So let's do the FWA half. I'll flip the marker here. The FWA player does not get any reinforcements this turn. He's not moving anybody. He's not declaring any combat. However, he is going to allocate all 15 points of his air points to offensive bombardment. It's this hex right here. Right, the Pavin player would need 8 steps. Let's see. 8 units of 2 steps to have enough points available for air defense. So there's no air defense. So we'll now go to the bombardment table. We'll be rolling on the 15 column. Rolled 1. Well, that's pretty good bombardment. All right, that's a 6 divided by the TDV of the defender, which is a 3. So that's 2 step losses and a fatigue. And we'll place 1 fatigue. That's a pretty good result. Well, that's pretty painful for the Pavin. Move this back over here. All right, there's no combat declaration, so there's no combat reaction and no combat resolution, so that is the end of the FWA half and the end of turn number 2. Okay, turn number 3. Let's move our game marker. It'll be the Pavin's turn again. We'll adjust the FWA points back to 15, remove all the first and final fire markers, recover fatigue, not yet, replace headquarters, none to be replaced. Place new units. So it looks like the Pavin team gets another set of reinforcements. They get the 1st Battalion of the 33rd Regiment and another mortar unit, and they're going to show up in this hex here, 2826. So let me set them up and I'll be right back. All right, here they are. And before I forget, I need to make sure I keep up with the victory points. The FWA player has scored 2 victory points. So let me fix that on the chart real quick. Okay. All right, new units are placed. Now it's the movement phase. I think I will start by moving my headquarters unit to here, moving the fatigued company, Charlie 2, the 33rd, to here along with this fatigue marker. I will move the heavy weapons company into here, and I will now move the 1st Battalion and its mortar 3, 6, 9. And I think I'll actually move this mortar in here as well. All right, now it's time to declare combat. And I think that this group of units here, the 3 companies from the 2nd Battalion and this mortar, are going to declare assault combat against the Special Forces Hex. For offensive bombardment, I think maybe I'll use this mortar. And by the way, let me mention this while we're on the subject here. Mortars in this game are considered artillery. I know I've mentioned that before, but there are slightly different rules between them. And one of them is this. Let me pull this up real quick. Okay, under artillery restrictions, when an artillery unit moves or fires, either place a first fire marker or flip the marker to its final side if it already has a first fire marker. An artillery unit bearing a final fire marker cannot be moved or use its bombardment strength. Any type of movement counts as movement for purposes of this rule. Exception, mortars. So in other words, a mortar unit can move and still fire and not be marked as first fire. But anytime a regular artillery piece moves, it has to be marked as first fire. And related to that, let me go over here. Non-mortar artillery, I'm looking right here. Non-mortar artillery cannot declare combat or resolve attacks like we're going to be doing right now. Right, I have a mortar in this hex, so he's going to be involved in the direct assault of this hex. A normal artillery unit can't do that. All right, so where were we? Combat declaration, offensive bombardment. I was going to use this mortar over here. To fire into this hex. We'll mark him first fire. All right, and now we'll go ahead and resolve the offensive bombardment. So on the bombardment table in the 2 column, none of those apply. You rolled a 4. 4 results in a 1, divided by the TDV of 4 is fraction, so there's no effect. So we can get rid of this. All right, combat reaction. There's going to be no combat refusal. These units are going to stay right here. They're not going to retreat. And I don't have anybody on the map yet that can respond as combat reaction. So the next step is combat resolution. Now this time around, the Pavan player has a headquarters unit on the map. So instead of rolling against the nominal value of 3 that they've been using, this value here, they can roll against the headquarters ER rating of 6. And of course, the units conducting the assault are all within the command range, which is 3 in this case. That's the superscript 3 that you see there. 1, 2. So we'll go ahead and roll for that. Roll a 1, so they're fully coordinated. All right, there's no maneuver combat, so we go straight to assault combat, starting with the defender allocates and resolves air and or artillery. So we have here 2, 4, 6, 7 steps. So I think what I'll do is use 8 air points so that the Pavan player can't conduct ADF. I'll use 8 air points, which will leave me with 7 for later. And since there is no ADF, we'll go ahead and roll on the bombardment table in the 8 column. Got a 3. So that's a 3 divided by the TDV of this hex, which is also 3, results in 1 step loss. And a fatigue. So let's see, I think I'll reduce the reduced company. I think I'm missing somebody. Oh, I can't see him under the board here. All right, the reduced infantry company, so I'll go ahead and reduce him. Do I want to do that? Or the mortar? I'll reduce the mortar. And I'll fatigue the mortar as well. So let me move the mortar to the bottom. And then I'll fatigue him. All right, so that was the bombardment. Now, the defender rolls first on the assault combat table. The defender has 3 defense strength. Even though these 2 guys are fatigued, they can still defend normally. So on the 3 column, let's see what we have for modifiers. That doesn't apply, that doesn't apply, that doesn't apply, but we have a +2 because more than 50% of the steps are fatigued. So we have 6 steps in this hex, and 4 of them are fatigued. So we got to roll +2 on the 3 column. 10 plus 2 is a 12, and that is a big whiff. All right, now the attacker. He has a strength of 7, 10. Is that right? Let me make sure I don't miss anybody. Yep, 10. And for him, we have plus train effects, which is 3, I believe. I don't know why I can't remember this for the Special Forces camp. Yes, it's 3. All right, so on the 10 column, +3, that's 11, nothing. Right, now we roll against the highest ER in each stack. The Pavin's attacking, his highest ER is 6. Let me move this over. Make life easier on myself. All right, his highest ER is a 6. We'll roll for him. He succeeded, and now for the CIDG, their highest is a 7. They succeeded. All right, now this assault is mutual. So I'll go through both attacks before I reduce any steps, because this is simultaneous. Right, defender. No, it doesn't really matter which one first, but we'll go ahead and do the defender. 3 plus 2. That's a 9 on the 3 column, that's nothing. And over here we have 10 plus 3. That's a 4 on the 10 column. And that is 1 step loss for the FWA. All right, so I'll go ahead and award the Pavin player a victory point. And that ends the Pavin half of the turn. So we'll flip the turn marker. Let's see, this is turn number 3. The FWA player does not get any reinforcements until next turn. There's going to be no movement. Offensive bombardment. Well, we have 7 air points remaining from our allotment of 15. So I think I'll go ahead and allocate that to here for offensive bombardment. Pavin player has 1, 2, only 6 steps available, so he can't conduct ADF. So on the bombardment table in the 7 column, roll the 7, 1 divided by 3, no effect. All right, no combat reaction because there's no combat declaration, no combat resolution, and that ends the FWA half of turn number 3. Right, moving on to 4. This is where things are really going to start getting interesting because we have a lot of reinforcements coming on in this turn. So we'll move the game turn marker. Turn number 4. Reset the air points back to 15 for this turn. Remove the first and final fire markers. Remove the assault and maneuver markers. And there are no target markers on the board. All right, so that brings us now to the Pavin half of turn number 4. Okay, so for turn number 4, the Pavin player is going to receive another headquarters unit and 2 battalions, the 33rd Battalion of the 32nd Regiment and the 535th Battalion of the 32nd Regiment. And they're going to set up within 2 hexes of 3619 according to scenario special rule number 4, which says, make this a little bit bigger, the Pavin 32nd Regiment units may not move until the turn after combat with the Arvin reinforcement column. And the reinforcement column doesn't come in until the second half of this turn. That means that these guys can't move until next turn. All right, so let's see where this is within 2 hexes of 3619. We know it's along the road to Pleiku. Here it is right here. So they have to set up within 2 hexes of this. Now remember, the objective for the relief column is to get into Bayonet. And we have some armor coming down the road, including the supply unit. They can't run through enemy troops. So if there are any enemy troops, any Pavin players on the road, the column has to stop. So that's something to keep in mind when we place these units. So let's see here. Where do you see 36? Okay, right here. 3619 is right here. Right, they've got to be within 2 hexes. So there's that battalion, and here's this battalion. Now, as I've said in previous videos, I am no tactician, never claimed to be, never will claim to be. I don't know if there are better places to set this up than right here, or a better way to do it, or spread the units out. I'm not sure. I guess you can do trial and error, play around and see, and I'm sure when I play this again I'll do something different. But for now I have this headquarters unit. Actually, you know what? They can't move until after combat, so I'm not sure I want to leave this headquarters unit here. Maybe what I want to do... No, we're good. We're good for now. All right, so this battalion is on the road, and this battalion is in the hex adjacent to the road. Let's just see the big picture here. The relief column is going to be coming from Pleiku, which is here, down Highway 19, and then down the secondary road. And they'll have to pass right through here where the ambush will be waiting for them. We've established that they can't move. Let's see what's going to happen down here. I think I skipped a step here. Yeah, we had to. I'm sorry, I had to go back and recover fatigue from this unit here. This is the beginning of the 4th turn, so we have to recover fatigue from here, which means this unit loses his fatigue, and he's good to go. So what I'm going to do is move this guy back to here and move this guy who is not fatigued back to here along with his fatigue marker. I'm going to move these guys, this battalion, adjacent to Bayonet, and I'm going to leave the mortar right where it is. He's got a range of 3, so he can still fire on this hex. Alright, I think we're good there. Okay, so what's the game plan for the PAVN here? I'd like to apply maximum pressure on the Special Forces hex. I don't want to leave people sitting around like I have in some past scenarios, so I think what I might do is, hoping for a good coordination roll, I'm going to assign maneuver combat to this battalion. And assign assault combat to this battalion. And if all goes well, I'll be able to use this mortar for support. I can't use the mortar in this hex because he's fatigued. So I know fatigued artillery can't contribute any firepower. And by the way, since I'm talking about the mortar, I found what I was looking for earlier. A mortar receives a first or final fire marker only when it's used for offensive or defensive bombardment or maneuver combat, never when it moves. So that's why the mortar unit can move and not be marked with first fire. All right, got that out of the way. So combat has been declared. There'll be no offensive bombardment phase. I'm going to try to save that one mortar for maneuver support. So the next is combat reaction phase. Once again, these units aren't going to refuse combat because they'd have to vacate the hex, and they're not going to do that. And I don't have any units on the board yet that can respond here, but I will in the second half of the turn as defender reaction. So the next step is combat resolution, starting with the attack coordination. Now, in order to use the HQ's ER of 6, all the attacking units have to be within command range, which they are. They're all within 3. And we have to be able to trace a direct line from the headquarters to the unit without going through any enemy zones of control. So we're good in that respect. So we have to roll for coordination. We need a 6 or less. We get a 2. Fantastic. So we can do maneuver combat, assault combat, and we can use the mortar for fire support. So the first thing we had to do is calculate the odds for maneuver combat. So here we have 15, and defending we have 3. So that's 5 to 1. Now we'll choose our lead units. I'll make it like before. The top unit in each stack will be the lead unit. All right, determine column shifts based on ER difference. So the lead for the PAVN has an ER 5, and the lead for the FWA has an ER of 7. That's a difference of 2, which still only results in 1 column shift. So that'll put us now in the 4 to 1 column. So now we're over here. And now both sides attack at first, allocate support fire. So the PAVN player is going to allocate his... Why does it do that? There we go. His 2 bombardment points. And I think the FWA player is going to allocate, let's see, what do we have here? I think I'll use 6 air points. And I'll just put this here for now. And the Pavin player does get to conduct ADF because he has more than 6 steps adjacent to the target hex. So we'll have to roll for ADF real quick. And we do have an artillery unit adjacent. That would be the mortar unit in here. No, he's in here. No. Oh, no. I got confused. He was here. I moved him. He was fatigued. Okay, so there's no -1. There's no revealed artillery. All right, so we'll just roll in the 2 column. I'm not going to roll anywhere, actually. Hang on. I'm confusing myself again. All right, so there's no air defense. So we have to resolve the fire support, starting with the Pavin player. So on the 2 column for the Pavin player, he rolls an 8. That's no effect, so we can get rid of that. And then for the FWA on the 6 column, we rolled a 7, which is a 1. So he's going to get a +1 die roll modifier when it comes time for maneuver combat. So now we can get rid of this. All right, the attacker rolls on the maneuver combat table. We said now we're on the 4-1 column. So this doesn't apply. We've already done the column shift. Fatigue in the defender's hex. More than 50% of the steps are fatigued, so that's a -2. There's no attacker support, no armor. That doesn't apply, that doesn't apply, that doesn't apply. Plus the train effects, which is a 3. So -2 plus 3, that's a +1. Plus the defender's support result of +1, so that's a +2. So on the 4-1 column with a +2. 10. Both fatigue 1 unit. Starting with the lead units. So we'll start with this guy. And then this guy, I'll just move him under the marker. Now everybody's fatigued. All right, the next step we check, oh no, that's maneuver combat. All right, there is no A or D, alpha or delta result, so nobody has to retreat. And what I'm talking about is this right here. All A and D results require retreat unless the defender utilizes the no retreat option or the defender is also being attacked in assault combat. Now, the defender is also being attacked in assault combat, but since we don't have an A or D result, it's really not even an issue. There's no retreat involved here, so we're good there. The next step, assault combat. The defender allocates and resolves air and or artillery. Well, we used 6 points for fire support, so now we'll use the remaining 9 points for defensive bombardment. And let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. Yep, the defender has enough, or the attacker has enough steps available for ADF. So let's go to the ADF table. There is no artillery unit adjacent. Rolled a 1. That's a hit. So we roll again. Got a 1. And that is -4 air points. And the FWA player loses a point permanently. So in going forward, for the remainder of the turns, we'll only have 14 air points available. But for now, we're losing 4 air points, which makes this a 5. All right, now going to the bombardment table on the 5 column. None of that applies. 10. That's as low as you can go. No effect. So I can get rid of that. And now the attacker, or I'm sorry, the defender gets to roll on the assault combat table. We have 3 on the 3 column. But we have to add a 2 because more than half our steps. Actually, all our steps are fatigued now. So here we go. 2 plus 2 is a 4 on the 3 column. Nothing. All right, now the attacker. He's attacking with 6, 9, 11. And plus terrain effects 3. So 11 on the 11 column plus 3. 11. Nothing. All right, the highest ER here is a 3. No, I'm sorry, it's a 6. They succeeded. Here it's still a 7. He did not succeed, so the Pavan player gets to assault again on the 10 column, plus 3. On the 11 column, I'm sorry, well, the same column, plus 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. Nothing. So that concludes the assault combat step for the Pavan turn. And now comes the FWA half of the 4th turn. All right, the Pavan player gets, I'm sorry, the FWA player gets a bunch of reinforcements this turn. Starting with this guy, Delta Force, the Ranger Company. He's going to go directly to Bayonet, not subject to a hot landing zone. Bayonet has not fallen, so we don't have to place him with reinforcement. So we'll do him first. Let's see. That would be this guy here. He goes straight to Bayonet. All right, then we have this Arvin Ranger Company, the 22nd Ranger Battalion. He goes in 4702, see Special Scenario Rule number 2. The Arvin 22 Ranger may not move until after first combat declaration between Arvin reinforcements and the Pavan. So it's same as these people down here. He can't move until after combat's been declared. All right, so we'll put him in 4702. Which is up here somewhere. Camp Holloway right there. All right, and the rest of our reinforcements within 1 hex of 4114. So let's find 4114. Here's 4114 right here. So they've got to be within 1 hex of that. So let me bring them all out here, and then we'll decide where we're going to put them. Let's see, put them here for a sec. What do we have? 2 M113s, a tank, 2 infantry companies, and the supply truck. All right, how best to split them up? All right, I think what I'm going to do is put one of the personnel carriers and the tank and the 2 infantry companies in the same hex. So let's see. We'll start with this guy. Put him right here. Not him yet. Let's see what we have here. All right, these guys will go in here too. Right now they're overstacked. but it doesn't matter because they're going to move here shortly and split up. And then we can put the headquarters company of the 3rd Armored Cav. That's the Arvin 3rd Armored Cav, right here. Okay, so big picture. Here's our diversion area assault. I don't know why I have so much trouble saying that word. Diversion area assault on Bayonet. Here's the ambush force, and here's the relief column coming down the road from Pleiku. We have one more unit available, one more company, but he can't move until after combat is declared between the relief column and the Pavin. All right, let me make sure I'm not missing anything else here. Army reinforcements, what the heck? Nope, they're good. Okay. And then our remaining reinforcements, they're going to come in on some turn after the first combat declaration. So we'll look at scenario special rule 3 when that happens. All right, so we're good for now. All right, so that is the place new units reinforcement phase. Move ground units. All right. I'm going to move one, two, three. Oh, by the way, let me show you. I'm on the road. In case you don't remember, for the train effects chart, secondary road, it costs 1 movement point for everybody. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Armored units don't have to stop when they enter an enemy zone of control. But he does have to stop here because this battalion is blocking the road. All right, this guy's going to join in 1, 2, 3, 4. My 2 infantry companies, 1, 2, 3. And I don't want to get too ambitious with this guy because when these guys move next turn, well, I can move one more. They'll only be able to move as far as here or here. So they won't be able to attack my supply column. All right, so that's the movement for the FWA. We're not moving anybody down here. Offensive bombardment. Actually, there's not going to be any offensive bombardment because the FWA player used all his air points for the fire support and defensive bombardment during the Pavin half of the turn. So now will come combat declaration phase, which should come before offensive bombardment anyway. I'm not declaring any combat down here. Up in this area, I think I will conduct an assault against the hex with the headquarters in it. I have 4 stacking points here. That's the max I can commit to an assault. This is not really a strong stack of units here, but I guess the best way to defeat an ambush is to attack it, right? That's the real world dogma, so I guess I'll take a chance. This might be a foolish move, but we'll do an assault combat here. All right, that's my combat declaration. There will be no offensive bombardment, as I mentioned, so now comes the combat reaction phase. I'm guessing the Pavin player, even though their intention was to lure this reinforcement column down this road, probably aren't quite ready to fight yet. I know I want to move this headquarters out of the way, so we may attempt combat refusal here. And remember, combat refusal, we take the highest TR in the stack, roll against it, and subtract the TDV of the hex. So the TDV of this hex is a 3. So rolling for this stack first. 4 minus 3 is 1. They succeeded. So this stack of units is going to retreat 1 hex, and they're going to move over to here. All right, that means that this goes away. And these units, if the FWA player desires, can occupy the hex just vacated. They can move up to 4 stacking points, which is both units. And I think he's going to do that. So we'll move into here. Now for these guys. All right, they're going to roll against their highest ER, which is a 5. And they get to subtract 3 from their roll as well. 9 minus 3 is 6, so they did not succeed. They've got to stand and face the assault, which may not end up so badly for them because this is a pretty weak attacking stack. All right, so the next one will be the combat resolution phase, starting with attack coordination by the FWA player. We have all Arvin units here, so attack coordination for them. Let's see. For Arvin only attacks. Arvin only attacks that include units stacked with Colonel Trong are always fully coordinated. Otherwise, roll against the nominal command value. Well, Colonel Trong is not on the map, so that means that we're rolling against the nominal value of 5 for the Arvin. Let's see how that works out. They rolled a 7. That's their ER plus 2. So no support, which they weren't going to use anyway. There's maneuver, no maneuver combat. The defender gets to pick 1 stack. There's only 1 stack. But the FWA player will have to add 1 for his die roll, and the defender gets to subtract 1 for his die roll. So, in the assault combat step, the defender allocates and resolves air and or artillery. Well, the defender has no artillery he can bring to bear, but he gets rolled first on the assault combat table. And he has a defense of 5, 8, 11. So he'll be rolling in the 11 column. Minus 1. Here we go. That's a 6 on the 11 column of the 6. And that's 1 step loss. So we'll take it from here. All right, now the attacker gets to roll, and the attacker has now only 4 attack strength. So he'll be rolling in this column. Let's see, he's uncoordinated plus 1, plus the train effects, and this unit is in Forested Hills, so that's plus 3. Total plus 4, but we only use up to plus 3 or minus 3. All right, so on the 4 column, plus 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. Nothing. All right, rolling against the highest ER in each stack. It's 5 here. Success. And a 5 here. Also success. Simultaneous combat. We'll roll again. 5, 8, 11. Minus 1. 1 minus 1 is a 0. Okay, so the Arvin player is going to lose 2 steps. Ooh, this is terrible. Well, let's hold off yet because this is mutual combat. So 3, 4, plus 3. That's a total miss. All right, so the Arvin player is going to lose 2 steps here. Not good at all. We'll eliminate this guy. That was not good for the Arvin player. All right, and I think that's going to take care of the FWA half of this player turn. There's no more combats anywhere. I don't think. Nope. So we can get rid of this. All right, and that's going to take us now into turn 6. So what I'll do is I'll end it here, and when I start the next video, we'll be at the beginning of turn number 6. I'll reset everything then, so you can see what's going on, and we'll see how this plays out. All right, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Have a good one. Bye.